All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the October 1st Litchfield Budget Committee meeting. We're going to call the meeting to order. We'll all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just his very neck. Not Rob first, but sorry.
Just for way of information, for those that are here this evening, Michelle Flynn, our lovely minutes taker, will not be joining us tonight. She's not feeling well, so she'll watch the meeting afterwards and circulate the minutes similar to what she did for last week for us. So we wish her a speedy recovery and to feel better. I did receive word that Ms. Harrison will be joining us through WebEx. I don't see her connected yet, but I do expect her to be dialed in tonight. Okay. Moving into public input. I don't see anybody on the WebEx or in the room, but I'll turn it open to public input, please.
Mr. Chair, that's correct. There's no one on the WebEx side.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Brunel. All right, we'll close public input, and there's a second public input at the end of tonight's meeting. Any changes or additions to tonight's agenda? No? Okay. Moving forward into correspondence. So first and foremost, welcome again to Mr. Scott Taylor.
Thank you.
Mr. Scott Taylor was formally sworn in and approved this earlier this week. So thank you, Terry, for all of your help with that. In terms of correspondence, I did receive the budget report actually on September 25th, and actually received it a day early. We received this week's budget report today. We did have the swearing of Mr. Taylor on September 29th. On September 29th, I circulated the budget Excel file that I use for my own process, and hopefully others will find that helpful this year. We'll certainly get into that a little bit later this evening. And then on September 30th, there was a request by a committee member to transfer that Google or that Excel sheet into Google Sheets, which I think I figured out and have done. So. Anything else to add to correspondence from any other committee members? No. Okay. Moving into minutes, we did receive the September 24th minutes earlier today. I have not had personally a chance to go through them in great detail. I know a couple of committee members, Ms. Harrison, had a couple of changes. Are we okay to defer those till next meeting? Yes.
Sure.
Okay, perfect. And that's what we will do. And then moving right into town business, right? And so tonight is the first night of our official budget review. We're going to start a 3-week process of reviewing town accounts. I included the review schedule with the agenda. And with that, we'll turn it over to Mr. Brown to get us kicked off.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you. Here we are again. How quickly a year flies by. And it's been an interesting year to date. So the process will be a lot different this year. Because of the room capacity due to the COVID-19, we obviously only have 12 people that can be in this room. So all of our department heads will be participating this year remotely. Karen White, our finance director, and myself will be here physically in the room to present and hopefully answer questions that you have. This year, the Board of Selectmen asked the department heads to put together a budget, and they asked that we take a zero-based budgeting approach, which was something that you kind of hear a lot of talk, in the private sector, not really something you hear a lot about in public sector. So it was a process for all the department heads. I'm very pleased to report back that even though in some lines, and we'll talk about that, zero-based budgeting really doesn't apply. But everyone did their best to start from scratch and really try to take a look at what the need was for the department in 2021. So, as the selectmen have thanked the department heads, I have thanked them. They really did a great job, and we put together a budget that we're all very proud of. But there were a lot of things going on that we discovered, and we're still struggling with them at this moment with our tax cap. And as you may recall, one of the biggest struggles that we have is that we had a warrant article last year that approved funding for the construction of a very important communication tower. And that was a $700,000 project. And the first year of that lease purchase, that financing for that project was not included in the 2020 budget. So right out of the gate with a $175,000 tax cap, as you'll see, the payment in 2021, right around $150,000, we're faced with that much of an incremental growth in our budget. We also are a little concerned about some revenues. Primarily the one that I'm mostly concerned with is revenues that we receive the state from income generated through tax from our meals and rooms, statewide tax. And we all know that the start of 2020, and as we sit here today, even though activity has picked up, still this particular sector of our economy has been hit pretty hard. And we don't know what the best guess is for what revenue will be in 2021. As of right now, we put this budget together. We've just level funded that line. We're kind of waiting for when we set our tax rate to see if there'll be any indication of a reduction, at least for the 2020, and to have a discussion with our DRA folks on what their anticipation would be for 2021. So that will be something we'll be discussing later. You need to, be aware of that if that amount is decreased, it will cause a situation where the tax cap will grow, the exceedance will increase. So at our last meeting, when we started looking at the budget, we were well over $100,000 over the tax cap. And just within the last 4 or 5 working days, we've been able to take some action. And I'm sure there'll be some additional work that'll be done over the next couple weeks, where we've gone back and taken a real hard look at our proposal and tried to identify things that we can defer for another year, or even see if at the end of this year, we're able to maybe purchase these things in 2020 and remove them from the 2021 budget. A good example of this, and it's a really money saver for 2021, was the police chief took a hard look at his budget, and due to a lot of factors with staffing vacancies that would basically freed up some money and some other encumbered funds that were repurposed for putting towards the purchase of administrative cars, we were able to remove about $62,000 from the proposed 2021 budget. And we're going to move forward and buy 2 admin cars this year before we close the books. That takes those proposals out of the 2021 budget. It was a nice big savings that I think really puts us down the right direction of addressing the vehicle fleet in the police department, and also trying to put a big reduction in our tax cap issue. Some other things that we've been faced with: the New Hampshire state retirement system had large increases, but there was an increase this year. And when you review that part of the budget, you'll see what the impact is on the town budget. We also have received unofficially our health insurance rates. Health insurance will probably, most likely, the rate increase will just exceed 6% this year. And our dental rates will exceed just over 1%. So those are preliminary right now, but I fully expect that they'll be ratified by the board of directors up at the Health Trust within the next week and a half. We're still waiting for our workers' compensation and our property liability insurance quotes. The school department is still, I haven't received official word yet on what the rate per gallon will be on propane. We participate with them. We try to, just because of the large quantity that they purchase, we're able to piggyback their contract and actually benefit from the cost that they're able to leverage. And the other thing is we have a union contract that we will be negotiating this year. We have not sat down yet with our police and dispatch folks, but that will be commencing very soon. And so we'll have to keep you informed about that. So that's where we're at. I think, it's very difficult. The town always goes first. So we going first, meaning that we go before the school. And we start putting together our budget in July, where, it's only been a few months just getting out of the election process. And we're only just a few months into our budget. And this year, with having the COVID impact, it was a tough year for us. So we still got a lot of moving parts, but I really feel that the Board of Selectmen and our department heads have a good handle on it. And I truly believe that by mid-October, the last couple of weeks of October, we're going to have a good solid budget and with all of our numbers together. So we're, like I said, a week ago, we were over the tax cap $100,000. Today, with work that we've done, we're exceeding it by $27,000. But there's going to be some issues that will come up that will cause the tax cap to increase, and there'll be work that we'll do to try to decrease it. So it's going to be a yo-yo for a couple of weeks. I think we just focus on the budget, looking at it, making sure that all the lines make sense, they add up, and there's truly justification for the request. That's a fair way of proceeding. So with that, let's see here. What was our first?
We have town meeting,
First one?
4130.30.
Our first budget?
Mhm.
Is accounting?
Town meeting.
Town meeting. Okay. So town meeting, you'll see, last year we come off a year where we had 3 or 4 elections.
Mhm.
So this year in 2021, we will only have one deliberative session and one just annual meeting. So throughout this budget, you pretty much see reductions just directly related to the fact that we're planning on just the deliberative session and that one annual meeting and backing out those costs. One increase that we had, most, like I said, they're all, the bottom line is $9,265. This is $11,229 less than the request last year. The one increase that we see is very minor, and that's the programming of the voting machines. It's an increase of $100. And the rest are direct reductions, but again, primarily due to just the number of elections. We did take a look at the last line. We've been carrying $3,000 for election supplies and equipment. And, the town has been very supportive over the last 3 years, I believe, in raising this amount of money. We've been able to, and I think if you've been to the polls, you've been able to see we've been able to update all of our voting booths and, and some other of the equipment we used. So the $1,000 is just to stay on top of it and pick up chairs and tables and an extra voting booth or whatever we need going forward. So there's always something every year. And with the pandemic still most likely going on and at deliberative in March, there will be a need for stuff. It will be.
Any questions on town meeting? Please.
We're getting all the sheets. Did you guys pass out a sheet earlier?
Town
You want a
Administrator
budget?
Brown handed out a few. I don't know if you have.
Yeah,
an
I have
extra.
one extra. If you want one.
Thank you. Okay. Moving into Town Clerk, 4140, please.
Okay, so Terry is participating with us remotely. We can see her there. And so I'll just go ahead, present, and she'll be here available to ask any of the technical questions that you may have in the operation for the town clerk and the tax collector. I also just always like to take time to point out, sometimes we always forget that the town clerk and tax collector budgets, even though they're separate, what we do is both departments are, staffed by the same employees. So when you're looking at salaries and benefits, they're all split 50-50. So if just some of us remember that, some of us are new. So the first lines are your wages. And as you see, there's been a couple of adjustments for the deputy town clerk, an increase of $515. The deputy town clerk, this is a new hire. It just recently happened within the last month. So what happened, we had an unexpected resignation this year in our part-time clerk position. At that time, the full-time deputy clerk, who had held that position for over 27 years, came forward and actually asked if they could go and step down and be the part-time clerk. It just was good timing for that person at this point in their career to take a step down. So we went out and recruited a new hire for the deputy town clerk. That's a full-time position. And we were able to find someone very, very fortunate that we were able to find someone that lives right here in town, Litchfield resident, and had already been working in the city of Manchester doing the work that, town clerk, tax collector officers do. So fully trained. And I know Terry can't say enough about what a great opportunity it was to be able to find a Litchfield resident already trained and really able to just walk right in and just hit the floor running. So that's been a blessing. It's very difficult. This is specialized training. There's people just don't walk around with this type of training. So that was great. The clerk position, as you see, there's an $8,700 increase. Now, what happened was during this transition, we took the part-time position, which was, 32-hour position, no benefits, and making, I think, just over $16 an hour. So during the transition, the person who stepped down went into the position at 35 hours. They've been with us for 27 years. And at the 35 hours, we have prorated benefits. It's considered a part-time employee. And we're able to, the wage didn't really change. And so that's why you see the increase in hours a week, and the wage did not decrease. It was kept the same. Again, this employee was 27 years plus with us, and it was just a good transition for the town. I thought the printer cartridges got out of there.
Department.
Oh, I knew I would do that. All right. So, so the bottom line here is $124,079. And this represents an increase of $7,933 over the previous year.
Any questions on town clerk?
Troy, just a couple of questions. One thing that stood out to me was and I saw this on another one too, the printer cartridges. Doubled times 2.5 on that in a couple of instances. I was just curious.
Yeah, so one of the things is kind of it will throw you off a little bit. It just threw me off, and Karen reminded me because I'm like, I thought we were actually removed the printer cartridges. So we've been making some adjustments, and so the original request from the department head was an increase in printer cartridges. There's been some changes in the printers, but to be honest with you, we took a look at the actual usage in the department, and we believe that the true cost for printer cartridges on an annual basis is right around $1,800. Some of that's being driven by the fact that we were doing a lot more work during COVID, and we will be doing that same amount of work for at least the next 6 months or more. But anyhow, what we were able to do is remove that increase and level fund it because the town clerk was able to apply for a grant, and she received $5,000 to help with the cost of elections and operating her department due to COVID impacts. So that's been removed in the selectmen's column, but you see it there in the department head column.
Yeah, and just for those that are following along, there's a couple of columns here, right? Department proposed and then selectmen proposed. In addition, when I circulated the file, if you're using the file for this evening, your reviews, that was as of Tuesday, right? A lot of changes happened yesterday, right, that are not reflected in that file. So I've asked Town Administrator Brown and Ms. White just to keep me posted and apprised of some of the changes so I can make sure they're updated on my side as well and get you guys the latest and greatest.
So we decided, we have a spreadsheet, and I brought paper copies, but we can share it with you electronically. But really the best way to track it is, I think, that changes going forward will make those adjustments in the selectmen's column so that we always have the original request documented in the department head column. It will probably confuse us throughout the whole process,
sure.
but at least it'll be documented.
So just so there's the point of clarity for the committee, right? If you're using that file, there's going to be some differences as they've made some adjustments, which has also impacted the tax cap, as they mentioned.
Are these generic cartridges? Are they refillable? Are they brand name?
I would have to defer to Terry. I don't take them out of the machine.
So we were using some generic ones, and when we got them, we ended up having some issues where we put them in the machine, and it was just screaming in the machine. So we tried to send them back. We try to order a couple at a time because it's cheaper that way. When I tried to send them back to the company, they wouldn't take them back because they said they were too old. So what I did is I talked to the RIT person, and we decided that it was probably best to stick with not using the name brand because we ended up losing quite a bit. And even the ones that are not name brand end up being, I think it was like $179 for the one that I ordered. And the company the supply company that we used said that it was too old and they would not warranty it because we had it too long. I told them how upset I was and that we wouldn't use them if that's the way that they were going to do it. They ended up sending us another one, and that second one did not work either. So we ended up going back to the actual name brand ones that go with the machine.
So what is the technology? Is it inkjet or something else?
We're using the HP ones for the HP that we actually have here.
I think they're probably
So
lasers.
probably
I think they're laser.
printers, yeah.
Yes, sorry.
Mr.
Thank you,
Cutter,
Terry.
I had another question.
Please.
And this one probably applies to some other accounts as well. But looking at mileage and seminars and conventions,
Yes.
so anticipating 2021 probably looking a lot like 2020, like you said earlier, and knowing that a lot of those might be virtual, has there been discussion around those being costs that may not be necessary in 2021, anticipating less travel, virtual meetings, virtual conferences, et cetera?
I think I don't want to speak for Terry because I know that, she's with the new hire in her department. Obviously, she's going to want that person to attend whatever training possibly, they can. And so there is everyone in every department right now, we're seeing that we're able to participate in training virtually. The hope is, though, obviously some of the most important parts of some of this training is actually the networking that goes on and just interacting with, other similar positions that work in different towns. But Terry, you're also very active in the Tax Collectors Association and the Town Clerks Association. I think she was just recently nominated or appointed as the president of the Tax Association in the state of New Hampshire. So I'm not sure if some of this is for traveling for those responsibilities too. But Terry, I'll allow you to answer.
Yes. So the traveling that I'll be doing for the New Hampshire Tax Collectors Association as the president will be paid for through the association. There are 2 conferences, and we're not sure what's going to happen, but there are 2 conferences, one for the town clerk that is done in late September and one that is done in October next year. It updates us on all the laws and all the, changes that have happened. I did leave that in there. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen a year from now. You're right, it may be virtual, but these are just the 2 that were left in there. There's also a certification program that is in August. And again, we don't know what is going to happen with COVID. But there's a certification program that I would like to get the deputy into. It's a program that I went through when I started 15 years ago. And Amanda's been doing this for 7 years, and I would like to get her certified as well so that she is on top of everything, so she could, eventually take over, do whatever she, whatever position he or she can. A deputy is supposed to do everything that the town clerk does or the tax collector does. So that is the goal here, to have 2 people that can do the same, the same thing. So I'd like to get her training as well. I know for this year, I did not put it in the budget for 2021, and I do plan on applying for a scholarship for her if need be.
I think Mr. Sun raises a great point on mileage and seminars, and it's actually one of the things that I'm starting to notice and highlight in my own just review of the budget, right? Less on the mileage, because it's pretty level. If you look at not just specifically to this one line, but across the entire town budget, mileage is pretty much level funded. It's actually a little bit less this next year than it was this past year by a couple $100. What's interesting though is on the seminars, it's actually 5,000 higher. Right, so this current year for 2021, you're planning total 43,000, where the current year 2020 was at 38,000. That has nothing to do with Terry's line, right? The main drivers of that are actually within code enforcement and within police. But it begs an interesting question, given that we likely know the first part of next year where this budget's applicable for, right, is likely going to continue to be virtual. I don't think we can accurately predict any time after March, April timeframe. Does it warrant kind of a X percentage reduction across, right? I don't know if that's 50%, because we all hope that we get back to a state of normal. But the reality is, I think for the beginning part of next year is we're not going to be there.
And I agree. And I mentioned, I pulled this out in this conversation, but I think I had mentioned early on, like I saw this across the board as well. And I know at least, in my professional area, these conferences are being offered at reduced cost because they are virtual. And so I wonder if that's something that, whether it's the association that Terry's involved in or other conferences, if we're proactively reaching out and asking, if you're having a spring conference, is that going to be offered at a reduced cost, assuming it might be virtually? And that could help inform some of these line items here.
And to that point, I work in that particular industry. I can tell you right now that from the hospitality perspective, they are not seeing events being booked until May at the earliest, and even May is extremely light. So the assumption should be anything for the first half of the year is going to be virtual because the facilities are not prepared to be able to handle it.
So in my view, right, where I'm looking at the budget in total at the moment, right? Again, not specifically related to Terry's budget specifically here, but if we look at this and say 50% less, given the current times, that still leaves a lot of money for conferences at a reduced amount to the taxpayer, and I think closely aligns to reality, but I don't know. Okay.
Can I ask one question on
Please.
the
Yep.
wages clerk, Mr. Brown? So as far as the increase there, is that an increase in overall number of hours that the clerks are working? And if so, is that tied to an increase in the number of vehicles and property taxes that need to be processed?
So, yeah, so what the only increase that we had, well, Terry's done a fantastic job working with the staff that she has and increasing hours. She now has hours in the morning from 7 to 8 by appointment only, but she's coming in early and covering that 1 extra hour every single day. And she's expanded hours to a Thursday evening, which is from 4 to 6. So we've increased hours in the town clerk tax collector's office. The only increase in actual physical payment would be the extra hours when we transitioned that clerk to the part-time position. So that went from 32 hours to 35. And yes, we've had discussions now for at least the last 2 years of the increased demand on the clerk's department, just motor vehicle registrations, overall work.
And the
Yeah.
online capability has not yielded the productivity benefit of being
There's-
able to.
I don't want
reduce-
to speak for Terry because Terry can explain to you that how much work is still involved even behind the scenes.
So the online, even though it's online, we are still doing the work here. What's happening is they're doing the registration online. I'm coming in at 6:30 in the morning and I do the online. I still have to print those registrations. I still have to put the decals with them, get the envelopes addressed. We're still doing the physical work here in this office, even though the resident is not standing in front of us. It's still the same amount of work. We're still doing the same thing and getting those, instead of just handing the resident their registration, we're actually getting the envelopes ready and mailing those out to them instead. So it's still the same amount of work if we do it with the customer here or if we are doing it online.
Okay. Any other questions?
Just in general, Mr. Brown, you mentioned probably the health insurance overall being about 6% or a little over 6%. That hasn't been calculated yet.
It
Or
is
that
actually,
is-
it's been entered.
Okay.
We entered it just in the last,
It has to get ratified.
24
or
hours.
whatever. Okay.
so, since the last selectmen's meeting, I think we've, including the police chief's, vehicles being removed, we've come up with over $100,000 of reductions. But then it's all Karen's fault. She went and updated our health insurance premiums, and we didn't net out $100,000 of savings. But yeah, it's all been factored in, and so your tax cap exceedings right now is at $27,000.
Okay. Hearing no other questions, let's move into tax collection, 4150.
Okay, so as I stated earlier, these positions are shared, so the numbers that you saw with wages, they should mirror what the town clerk numbers were. So those increases for the deputy, $515, for the clerk, part-time clerk, $8,724, and the town clerk, the elected town clerk tax collector, $229. We had a nice sizable decrease in our postage. And this is directly due to the fact that Terry and her staff have decided to take in the actual work involved in preparing a lot of the information that's mailed out. So we're doing a lot of that work in-house. We used to contract it out. The only thing contracted out now is the tax bills that go out twice a year. Everything else is done in-house, and that did result in savings for the town. So the bottom line here is $123,453. I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong column. $122,916. It represents an increase of $7,522.
I think it's a very similar conversation to we just had with 7Rs and mileage. You know, another thing that I'm watching here, and as I watch very closely every year, I'm sure you can predict this, Troy, is overtime, right? And I know in these two budgets that we just reviewed, the overtime is very minor, and it's certainly not the stem of any issues, but it begs itself to a larger question across the entire budget, right? Where for overtime, we're funding as a town about $200,000, right? Again, largely attributed to other departments, but in a tight tax cap year, overtime, I think, is something this committee really needs to take a hard look at and consider. So,
Yeah, I mean, this department here, and I know you're not talking about this department,
correct.
but overtime happens. So, in this department, for example, I know, and I witness it all the time, that, if a customer walks into the building and it's about closing time, we're not going to tell that person to leave. And we could proceed with that transaction for another half hour. And if that employee is here for an extra half hour, Terry does her best to manage it. In some cases, they'll be paid overtime. Some cases, they'll be asked to adjust their hour at the end of the week, or, come in and work 7.5 hours the next day. But that's how, Terry's able to keep her overtime in her department down. And when you get into
Usually
public,
we don't have overtime. The reason for the overtime with this is, of course, with all of the absentee ballots that are going out, and like Troy said, these two budgets are just split in half with the payroll, and so that's how it's done. But the overtime for this is the fact that we have a lot of, we just sent out over 800 absentee ballots for this election. So there's no way of, getting around some of the overtime. But most years, if you look back on our budget, we don't usually use overtime. What we'll do is, as Troy said, if a customer comes in 5 minutes and it's a 20-minute transaction, we'll kind of try to make it up the next day, come in 20 minutes late, or we're trying to work now that we have the new deputy, and we're trying to work it now so that we kind of have staggered hours. So she comes in from 8:15 to 4:15. Pat comes in from 8 to 4, and I'm here from 6 to whenever I need to be here to make sure that everybody's taken care of and we're not using that overtime. But the overtime in this case, it's not a lot, but the overtime in this case is basically from the elections and getting all this, this stuff out, and, the renewal notices, and also, the tax notices and all that. So.
Yeah, and again, it's not really specifically to these two lines. It's more across the entire
Right.
budget. For these two lines, I'm showing about $1,000 in overtime total, $500 on each one of these accounts, which, given your justification, makes complete sense. But I think it's just more of a global type of discussion we have to have across this budget. Right? A few years ago, our overtime was $170,000. Now we're at $200,000. There are years in the past where we've had $230,000 to $240,000 in overtime. So it's really been all over the map. I don't know what the right number is, but again, in a tight year, overtime to me is extra, right? Do we have more of a systemic problem that we need to address within the departments to address overtime?
If I could ask a follow-up question, Mr. Brown, very similar to what I had asked earlier in terms of, the number of registrations and property taxes that you're processing. The beauty part about this particular part of the town is that you are revenue generating. So compared to what we're seeing, which is, approximately a 6% increase in cost for this department, what are we seeing year over year typically? We're seeing a 5% increase, less than 5% increase in overall revenue as far as
We're
things that are
seeing-
coming in for motor vehicle registration and property taxes?
Well, you've seen, Terry and I were just reviewing that today as we adjusted the motor vehicle revenues. And I think that, the discussion was about 3 years ago, we had about $1.7 million of revenues generated. And as we're projecting in 2021, we're looking at 1.9 million. So we're just seeing continuous growth.
Right.
And that is the biggest revenue maker besides property tax in the town.
So between more people in the town and more revenue coming
Yeah.
in, certainly
people-
in terms of
typical
more
people.
hours in the tax office is
Oh,
necessary.
yeah. I mean,
process
it's
it.
very common now. People have 3 or 4 cars in the driveway. It's not 1 or 2 anymore.
Okay.
You have 2?
My kid,
Wait,
oh, my oldest
they're going to
is
get a driver's
driving.
license soon.
He's not allowed to drive. See what boys are.
All right, moving
4 and 2 tractors, so.
moving forward to sanitation administration, 4321.
All right, so we'll go down to the bottom here. A recap of what we're asking for this year is $454,557, and it represents an increase of $25,262 over last year. Dave did, as always, Dave did a real good job at taking a look at his line items and working hard at making sure that he adhered to the zero-based budgeting. And we had some good conversations because his operation is sort of unique and it's different. And I think we all know what that this facility is used very heavily by our residents. So in our salary lines, you see the facility manager. There was an increase there, $7,301. We took a look at this position, compared it internally to comparable positions and outside, and there was, during the performance review, there was an adjustment made for this person to bring it in line with what the compensation should be for that position. So that's directly related to 25 years of service and excellent service, I might add. The staff is down 3,000, but this, Dave is constantly changing schedules. He works with a crew that they're very flexible, but sometimes they have second jobs and you have to adjust depending on what their second job requirements are. So these are all, pretty much part-time positions. This is really their second job. So it just works out to be that in our forecast for 2021, it looks like we'll be down $3,000. But as you're on the budget committee, you'll see this, depending on the demand down at the facility and the staff that we have, this can swing anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 every year, depending on who's available to work and who's not, and the hours that are needed. Overtime, just as no increase here, but just because we've had a little conversation about overtime this evening, overtime in this budget probably should be budgeted higher, but due to the situation that we're in, we decided to keep it level. As you can see, back in 19, we spent $3,180. Overtime in this budget it's used for a lot of different things. The first item is David for me. When we have snow events, there are days when we're not open But the trash containers are scheduled to be removed, and that happens twice a week. So for, almost 6 months out of the year, if in fact we have a snow event, we have to come into the facility and clean all the containers, clean around the containers. They need to be accessible to the trucks that come in, and you have to get up on the containers, clean the snow off. I mean, you don't want that material going to the scales, and two, it's just a requirement of waste management. So also, when we have holidays, this department does not close for a couple of the holidays, Veterans Day, the day after Thanksgiving. And on those days, we end up paying overtime for the men to work those days. And there are times when we got to come in and do cleaning. Right now we're cleaning all the time because of COVID, but even when we're not in a COVID related situation, we're coming in at times when we're down on staff and we had a heavy weekend. There are times when they'll have to come in and work a couple hours overtime just to get things cleaned up, safe for the general public and our employees to start working again and using the facility when the facility is open. So a lot going on down there, and to try to run the facility with just a part-time staff, one full-timer, open some holidays. I think he does a great job, and to keep that overtime at around $2,000 a year is good. The one thing that you see a big increase here, I call it big, but $1,300 down at line number 560, solid waste dues. That's directly related to the National Regional Planning Commission. They coordinate a regional effort for the household hazardous waste collection. And I forget the number of towns there are at least 10 or 12 towns that are involved in this. And a long time ago, way before my time, these towns got together and they went to the Regional Planning Commission and asked for them to coordinate a regional effort to be able to manage our hazardous waste. Because if we were going to try to do this on our own, the training and have the right type of facility and the licenses and permits, it just, the cost would be a lot more than the $7,500 here being asked. So this covers our portion of the annual dues. So that those, they have, I think, 4 annual household hazardous waste collection days, and residents in this town can bring their hazardous waste. Dave will collect. Sometimes we collect some hazardous waste because it's left there on a table that it shouldn't be left, but we do sometimes collect our own stuff. And that's what, covers that cost. We don't have a disposal cost or anything like that. We pay those dues. And like I said, 10 or 12 communities do that. The other 2 big items, what we do is we take a look at our run rates. And this is the tool, this is the way we calculate our solid waste quantities and the demolition material each year. Dave will take a look at a run rate that will consist of 6 months prior and the 6 months of the current budget. And that's what we use for benchmarking. And that's how we calculate our best guess on how many tons of material we'll dispose of in 2021. And based on that tonnage, Dave knows how many hauls will be involved. That gets tweaked every year based on demand. I can tell you demand is through the roof down there at the facility. It's just, it's been a real challenge for him and his staff this year. It's just, the facility is just in big demand. He's had to increase hours of operation. But on top of this, our contract that we have with Waste Management has a built-in 3% escalator clause. So along with us adjusting what we think the tonnage will be in the hauls, there's also a 3% increase there. So that's directly why you see a proposal to increase the demolition at $15,099 and the solid waste at $3,969. And that brings you to the bottom, as we had stated, a $23,609 increase over last year. I did it again. Or we didn't do it right. You did the wrong column. Maybe.
So this,
Oh, the health insurance.
so this factors in continued increased hours.
What's that?
So we've added hours, obviously, was it Wednesdays and Fridays? Does this carry forward those extended hours?
I don't believe we did that. We didn't, no.
I think the same hours, just different
Yeah,
people doing the hours.
yeah, this is
It
not.
was the same hours.
David, you're on?
Yes, I am.
Did we didn't budget the extra COVID hours in this budget, did we?
No, we did not.
I didn't think so.
No.
So the
We-
expectation then is we'll return to previous hours or
Ye-
just keep shifting the
You know,
schedules?
Dave and I have that discussion. I'd like to believe that sometime after the first of the year, you know, we're going to have the holiday impact.
Mhm.
Sometime after the first of the year, when COVID hit, a lot of people were home.
Mhm.
And a lot of people decided they were going to do home improvement projects. They decided they were going to clean up the shed, clean up the garage, clean up the basement. And we just got overwhelmed. There's a lot of yard work being done. So we'd like to think that sometime towards the end of this year, first of the year, we'll be going back to normal hours.
Thank you.
Any other questions on sanitation? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dave, for joining. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Oh, there he is.
Moving over to the road agent, 4311.
All right, make sure I use the right column. Dun, dun, dun. We're way down. Highway. Okay. So road maintenance, our bottom line proposal, 719.
Which one are we on?
Road agent, please.
4311, right?
I'm
Yep.
sorry.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm
All right.
lying. The road agent.
Thank you.
A lot of these are called
I was
very similar.
throwing out some big numbers there. I jumped right in the road maintenance. Road agent. Our bottom line is $24,468. This is a decrease of $2,607 over last year. This is directly, the decrease is, looks like it really is directly related to our projections on electricity, the propane gas. And then our building maintenance, what we did was we, just really took this is where we did the zero-based budgeting. Maintenance and repair is we don't have a lot of scheduled maintenance because of the building that it is, other than, making sure that the furnace is serviced. Other stuff is just repairs that are done. Garage doors break, the furnace breaks down, light fixtures need to be replaced, that kind of stuff. So we can't just come up with a list of what we think the maintenance is going to be. So we took a 3-year average of what the cost has been, and that's how we came up with our estimate of $2,021, which turned out to be a savings of $1,479 over last year's.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on road agent budget?
Did you die?
I guess I would like to, I can't click the hyperlink right now, so it's not working. The stormwater permit, we discuss that every year because it's always like in flux as to what's actually going to be required.
Yeah.
So if
they-
I were to actually be able to successfully click that link, which is now purple, but has nothing on my screen, what would I be seeing?
The 2017 summary.
So do we have a 2021 or 2020 summary of what is expected?
It's so the MS4, we utilize an engineering firm, an environmental engineering firm that it provides assistance to the road agent, myself, throughout the year and updating. Just for those folks that maybe this is new to you, MS4 is just a term that the Environmental Protection Agency, Region 1 out of Boston, uses for those communities that have a municipal sewer system, stormwater sewer system. So we have catch basins and infrastructure under our road that collects water runoff, and then it discharges it into areas that eventually make it to streams and ponds and rivers. As part of the, Clean Water Act, the EPA came out a long time ago with standards that communities within a certain population density had to meet. Litchfield, unfortunately, is in one of those areas where we fall within the guidelines, where because of our population density and the streams and rivers that we have in our area, we're required to have a stormwater permit. In that permit, the one that we're operating under right now, it's a 6-year permit, and it starts off with various requirements, mandatory requirements. The first year of this permit was some basic mapping and inventorying of our infrastructure, and then we're developing policies and regulations and standard operating procedures on how we go out, we clean the catch basins, we inspect the catch basins, the outfalls, and we have to come up with guidelines on how we address maybe illicit discharges. And the whole outcome of this is part of a way to try to eliminate things like nitrogens, bacteria, phosphates from getting into our groundwater and rivers and streams and stuff. It's actually, it requires the specialty of an environmental engineering firm to assist the town throughout the year to meet the minimum mandates of the permit. So I do not believe that this is going to go, well, this will not go away. If anything, it's quite possible that as we start trying to move more towards some of the more mapping requirements, where we're going to have to go out and literally identify swales and catchment areas and go out and collect that data and map it, it's going to require a lot more money to do that. So as of right now, we've been trying to do what we can with the $10,000 allowance, and then we do work in-house as well. So I can tell you that there are towns bigger than us, town of Pelham, and there's another community where they've actually gone out and hired, brought on staff, full-time staff, just to take care of their stormwater management permit requirements. Now, those are bigger communities. They have a lot more infrastructure, and they may have sewer treatment facilities, but it's a lot of work.
Mr. Brown. Hi. Is there a way, so we get the really helpful updates on how much of the budget has been expended from Karen, which are great. But the way that this is reported with the stormwater management and then the construction design consultation, it's all just in that one line. So it's hard for us to know, so according to what I think we received today, of the 15,000 that was budgeted in that line, about 8,000 has been expended. Is there a way to know the breakdown between how much of that was for stormwater and how much of that was for construction, design, and consultation?
I can do that, but I can't get into the MSI.
Yeah, we can provide you with that. We can't right now, but we can provide you with that detail.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think it would be helpful for me and maybe others to know that breakdown between, the 10 and the 5, if it's, are we really getting up to that 10 on the stormwater management, or?
Yeah,
it's just hard to know.
We just finished our permit annual report submittal. So I'll be probably getting the final bill from Hoyle Tanner probably next week or the following week. And my guess is that we're going to be just under the 10 grand, 9,000 something, might be a little bit over.
Okay.
But we can get that. We'll know exactly what.
Thank you.
Ms. Harrison, you've been quiet. Any questions from your side?
No, I'm doing well, actually. Keeping up. The only question that I had, I'm working off the Excel sheet that was saved to the Google Drive or on Google. So I'm looking at the shared
Yep.
Google Doc, and I might have missed the first few minutes of Mr. Brown's summary. But on the summary tab, there was, I think, an error in one of the calculations. I don't know if you've already discussed it, or we can come back to it later. That's fine. I don't have any questions at this time.
Was it a positive error? Like, or negative?
It's kind of all over the place. So what happened?
Don't
was-
blow my bubble tonight. I
I know. No, I think it'll work out. Maybe it'll work out. Let's see how it goes. So column P was the 2021 proposed versus, it says versus 2020. But it actually links to column L.
Yeah.
Oh.
Which is 2019.
I noticed your percentage was off. Yeah.
Yeah. So
okay.
they're a little wacky there.
Yeah. Right. We'll make, yeah. That's, yeah, we probably got these linked.
Good catch.
Yeah.
As of Tuesday, that you were reflecting at 3%. The actual percent as of Tuesday was 2.71%. So
Yeah.
So make it look better.
That was really the only question that I had.
Yep, good point.
We'll do.
The only thing I would add is under road agent and road maintenance. I know we have Mr. Brown with us tonight. Jokingly at the Board of Selectmen meeting the other night, he indicated there was clear fat in these budgets. So yeah, okay. Anyway, we'll move into road maintenance, please. 4312.
All right.
Be a lot of snow in front of the office.
All right, the bottom line on this budget is $719,823. There's a decrease of $83,516. And I will tell you that a big chunk of that is our highway block grant. Last year, we received a grant, a one-time grant from the state of New Hampshire. And we had to include it in the operating budget so that it was accepted actually by town vote when you approve the budget. So it artificially inflated this line in the amount of $68,205. That was the extra money the state received. We received 2 checks for infrastructure improvements. And the $68,205 was received in 2020. The other check was received in 2019. So I just wanted to point that out to you. This is why I don't like it when the state does this, but this is the way they disperse the funds. It was always good to receive the money, but it does create these artificial spikes. Mm-hmm. So you had $68,205, a one-time grant in the highway block grant account number 730 that will not be received in 2021.
I know we talk about this every year, but how confident are you in the 180,000?
So that number, I'm glad you asked that question, because the number that we're going to be using this year when we set our tax rate in hopefully a couple of weeks will be 202,000. So we just were advised what the exact number is, in an email yesterday, I think. So the 180, I may increase that to like something like 190. I don't think I'll put it at 200, but I can tell you that it's offset 100, whatever number I put in there, it's offset 100% by revenue. Mm-hmm. So there's no tax impact.
So why not budget for the 202?
Well, that's usually what I do is I usually budget what I receive in a prior year. My fear is this year, that if I budget the 202, but we end up learning in September 2021 that it's only going to be 191,000 because of the direct impact of the COVID and less people traveling, less tax on gas, then you do actually, that difference would have to be made up in taxes. So you have to be a little careful because, it's okay, if you're kind of spot on and the number it doesn't change that much. It usually increases a couple thousand or decreases a couple of thousand, but I'm just very concerned about the fact that for 6 months of this year, there wasn't a lot of traveling going on.
Right.
And a lot of this highway block grant money is the revenue is generated through gas tax. So you understand. So if I budget 180, or if I budget 200,
You're being
and
conservative.
we really end up getting 180, then there'll be an additional tax of 20 to make up the difference.
Yep. Got it.
Okay, so we'll go back. The wages, we have, I know someone else has already asked me about why the overtime has increased in this department. And I can tell you that there's been some changes over the last few years in the department. There was a time when the highway manager was only 32 hours a week, and so when that person worked, over the 32 hours, it still was straight time. And there was a time not long ago when we just had the highway manager and we just had a part-time employee. And then eventually we had a full-time employee, but the full-time employee didn't, didn't have a full-time employee, but the part-time employee went away in the winter and went south, and he just really worked for the department in the summertime. So this past year was the first year where we had a full-time highway manager and a full-time laborer. So we had 2 full-time employees in the highway garage, and we'll have that again this year. So that's why you see an increase in the overtime. Is directly related to the fact that we're going to have 2 full-timers, and those full-timers will be out there plowing snow, and there will be an overtime cost. You can see last year was a bad year. We had $18,128 in overtime, but we got hit really bad in the month of December. If you remember, it was something that it was a very unusual event. We put in a lot of hours in December.
Yes, I remember that.
You didn't call me.
No, I did not. Your truck did not get stuck at the end of my road either. I think also it's, we should note, we made it last year, we had 53 weeks. So this year we have 52. So you're getting the benefit there that we got killed last year.
Yes, yeah, we had that extra week last year.
We've got 3 more years, right? Or 4 more years
Yeah.
until it comes around again. So.
Mr. Brown, does the town get any relief, or are there any grants or anything to be able to offset a harsh winter? Because then if I also take a look, certainly in 2019, your salt purchase grew quite a bit as well. Is there anything that the town can do to try to offset those types of events to help ease the taxpayers' burden on overtime and additional salt?
So the only thing would be is if in fact we have a storm event where the governor will declare, a
State of emergency.
So call it
State of
disaster, but a state of emergency, and that will open the door up for FEMA funding. And we have done that several times and have been able to get reimbursement.
But usually that is the result of like massive power outages for days on
It
end.
can be an ice storm.
I mean, this
It
is
can
New
be
England.
snow. It could be snow accumulation, but usually it's ice storms.
majorly
What we've been and floods.
Mhm.
Is what we've had in the past, 10 to 15 years. But definitely blizzards would qualify.
We're doing a good winter, like it's a nice winter.
Any other questions on road maintenance? Or Mr. Brown, anything you'd like to highlight to the committee?
I had a question.
Okay.
How confident are you in the cost for the salt? Because I think it's one of the few years we don't see an increase in the cost of the unit, or the unit cost.
No increase this year.
Good job.
There's no increase this year. We got the contract last week, and it's gonna stay at $49.50 a ton.
Excellent.
Same as it has been for the past 2 years.
Okay.
I think that's it for now.
Any other questions?
Not off the top of my head.
No? Okay. Let's move into street lighting, please. 4316. Mr. Brown, did you actually confirm how many streetlights we have in town? I know Mr. LaSalle was concerned about this, right?
I believe.
Is there 60? Was that the number?
Nope, I have it here.
47.
I
Okay.
actually, 47.
Mr. Leary, have you gone through and actually counted all 47?
No. We have 47 streetlights. You'll see the hyperlink, the streetlights. If you put your mouse over that, you can bring up a spreadsheet where I do an analysis for all of the electric costs in our town facilities. And I do an average of the 2 prior years and our current run rate, and that's kind of where I come up with what my estimate. Streetlights usually, they don't fluctuate that much.
I know years ago, we've talked about, the town transitioning to LED and, just to continue that conversation for another year. I know there's costs associated to that, to switching, right? But does it pay off long-term in terms of electricity cost?
Yeah, I know. And I know it is definitely something that I want to take a look at. And every year, trying to find the time to look at it, we just haven't, been able to do that. It's on our list to do. The town needs to do it because it's just the right thing to do. I don't know if it's going to result in savings to the town because typically the way you do it, you would take the energy savings and use that to finance the cost over a period of time because we would have to purchase and install the fixtures. But in return, you'd get, obviously an LED light that should be maintenance free for a good 20 to 30 years.
Sorry, Mr. Cutter. There might also be incentives at the state level. I know that, when we're looking at energy efficiency improvements, we've been told that there are grants available, for doing that kind of thing, rebates available. So there might be additional revenue or, funding for that available.
So, Mrs. Harrison, would it be possible to have maybe one of the students at Campbell High School, for example, do this as some sort of a project to look for those types of rebates that might be available and then take care of what Mr. Brown was talking about as far as doing a feasibility study to be able to have something that could be a great benefit for them going out into the workforce? And it would benefit us.
I can't speak for the students, but, that would definitely be an interesting project. I like that idea.
It would be a great project. And
Any Eagle Scouts or Boy Scouts listening in?
Class project as well.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions on street lighting? Pretty straightforward line here. Okay. Accounting, 4150.
Okay, so the bottom line for accounting, $276,565 represents an increase of $7,578. We have up in wages, you'll see that the finance staff, we had an increase in wages of $5,592. Again, this was through our performance review process, and we did have an adjustment made for the finance director, same explanation that I gave for the solid waste facilities director, where we took a look at the position and what the comparable pay should be for someone holding that position and responsibility. At the same time, the position was added the title of assistant town administrator as well, as she's begun to start working with me on a more day-to-day basis, to have, backup when needed, and to have basically two individuals here operating the town. Much like we have in our fire departments and police departments, you usually have a chief and a deputy, just to make sure if anything were ever to go wrong, vacancies or whatever, we have the staff and experience to be able to keep things moving forward. So that was a big step for this town, and I know it will pay off in the long run. So you see a lot of decreases here for overtime. That's directly related to the fact that the overtime really was the finance director. In changing the position, it turned into a salaried position, so there will be no overtime in the department. Health insurance, we had some changes in enrollment, so that's why you actually see negatives there and not an increase. A largest increase here that you're going to see is the auditing services. So the auditing firm that we've had this town for many, many years. Contract expired this year, and the selectmen were very supportive of continuing to use their services. We've built a real good relationship with this firm, and we know their staff. We understand what it is they need, and you build this. When you have your audits, you basically build a real good relationship with the firm. So when we went and asked them to renew the contract, they came back and said, we really need, you're one of those towns that we have that's needs to have an adjustment. We haven't really adjusted your contract in a while. And so we have a 3-year contract, which starts off in 2021 at $25,000, 2022 be $26,000, and 2023 $27,000. One of the things that we also need to do is, in addition to the auditing services, which is, the general accounting that we do for our books, there's another requirement through the Government Accounting Standards Board, which is GASB, where we take a look at our post-retirement benefits. And there's a requirement, it's highly recommended that there's a process that they go through to determine what the liability is for the town with post benefits. Primarily, these benefits, what they're talking about is employees that are retired and they continue to be on our health insurance and dental insurance plans. And because they're at a higher risk, that has a direct impact on our rates that we pay. And there's a process that's they go through and they determine what that risk is. And it's a document that is required in your financial statements. If it's not in there, then you will have a finding. It will be a negative comment in your financial reports. I don't know what that's going to cost. I'm hoping that it's somewhere. My guess is that it's somewhere around $2,000 to $5,000.
So I know you wanted to continue the relationship, but did we solicit or did we talk to other people just to check to see if that number is in the right ballpark?
Bid it out.
It's there. Oh, did you guys?
We were just wondering, did it go out to bid?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if
I'm
your
not even-
backgrounds were audited and you
No,
said
I'm
yeah,
not
it's
even
there.
saying going out to bid.
We
but
didn't-
just
we did-
like
we-
back of an envelope.
That was the discussion that we had, whether we were going to go out to bid. And at the time, we decided that we would continue the relationship. And I do think that, you know, when the pricing came back, the board was like, okay, you know, because there was a verbal commitment that we wouldn't go out to bid. They didn't want to reveal their numbers and then have us say, well, that's too much. We're going to go out to bid. So there was an agreement that they would put together a proposal and that we would go sole source. But I can tell you that the selectmen have looked at that number and, you know, they will have that discussion at the end of this 3-year contract.
Yeah, I understand that there's a relationship built, but we're talking a sizable increase in a tight budget. I mean, having been on the other side, I don't know these people, but talking to other people at least keeps them honest. At least we'll know that that's the right number. You know, it's just, we don't have that as a budget committee person. I don't have the confidence that I'm just saying, if I were me looking at this number, it makes me a little nervous because I don't know that that's the going rate.
I think it's a fair point, and I
Yep.
think Mr. Leary will
Yep.
relay that message back to the Board of Selectmen. This is a contract, and we really
Yeah, absolutely.
can't dispute it.
Well, I can't dispute it, but I can question
We
whether to
can't
fund
dispute
it.
the dollars.
I can't dispute it, but I can, you know, we can decide how to fund it. So, but for future, I would like backup and supporting documentation, assuming.
We normally ask that question on everything.
Mr. Sun?
Yeah, Mr. Brown, I had a question about the bank deposits. So is that a daily trip, if I'm understanding that correctly? Is that based on 250? I'm assuming that's what that is.
It is. It's pretty much turns out to be a daily trip. But, you know, one of the things that we have, we've over the years, this comes up every year, we take a look at, I know that there's ways that we can scan checks and have those things deposited electronically. But the problem is we still have cash. And we had the state laws that require the tax collector to deposit any deposits, you know, that she has in exceedance of $1,500. So
in other words, she can't hold that cash.
yeah, state law. So, and that's why you find that most towns still, a lot of towns are lucky that they have a bank nearby and they actually utilize a courier service. We've looked into that. That's far more expensive than transporting ourselves. And if we had the service where we would scan our checks, then, you know, there'd be a reduction in some of our fees. So it would be a cost to the town, but we still would have to go to the bank because we got to get the cash deposited.
Okay.
I don't know how you manage the cash in light of COVID, right? I mean, you think about the number one dirtiest thing out there on the market is cash, right?
Yeah.
I would think that
Changing
it would be something to reconsider because I know a lot of people are very anxious about using cash.
Cashless.
During COVID.
Some people are.
Yeah.
I'm
We're taking cash now, but when we hit COVID, you know, there's a period of time there, March right through until we reopened, we weren't accepting cash. So.
Okay. Okay, moving right along. Anything else on accounting? Let's move into everyone's favorite subject of reevaluation of property.
This one's a little different this year. The bottom line is $26,996. There's a reduction here of $29,701. And the reason is, as you all know, we just went through an update year. So every 5 years, the town's required by state law to do a reevaluation. The contract that we had with our assessors for the prior 5 years, we actually paid the normal administrative work that's involved every year and just doing, you know, all the pickup work from building permits and changes in properties. And in addition to that, they would go out on a quarterly basis. We'd pick up a quarter of the town each year where they would go out and do a drive-by and just try to start doing the update process. They, at this point in time, they have a very good comfort level with their data. They've done this town for many years. The data is solid, and they don't feel it's necessary that they need to do this additional work throughout the 4-year period. So we're not paying. That's why the reduction. However, when you hit year 5, the actual work that's involved in just doing the update is estimated to be about $100,000. So when we review the warrant articles, you'll see that the selectmen are proposing to establish an expendable trust fund, and the goal being that we put aside $25,000 each year, so that when we get to year 5, we don't have to sit here and come up with $100,000. We'll have it in the bank, and hopefully we'll be able to take, set that money aside with the unassigned fund balance, which is, basically surplus from the previous year. So it's money that's already been taxed on folks, and we'll put it in those expendable trust funds. So no real big it looks like there's a savings, but you really need, at the same time, we'll need to put money away in savings through another source.
Any questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Brown. Moving into the Board of Selectmen, 4130.
All right, let's see here. So the bottom line with this budget, $137,500. It's an increase of $6,609. And the salaries in here, my salary, town administrator, had an increase of $5,534. And selectmen expenses, I don't know why that's. Selectmen expenses, we increase just the things that have been going on with awards and recognition and flowers for different events, retirements. That's what this line is used for. And it just seems that we continue to see rising costs in this area. It's one of those ones where we did the zero-based budgeting. You see, all I did was take a 3-year average of what we've been spending. Health insurance, that's the $853, a direct result of the 6% increase. The dental as well, of $9 increase. Long-term disability would be based on salary, and I don't think we have a rate increase, but it's just a percentage of the salary. Clerical support. So we have support for the Zoning Board of Adjustment, the Budget Committee, and the Board of Selectmen. The Zoning Board of Adjustment has, we started doing clerical support for them about a year ago. Prior to that, they had a member that would actually transcribe the meeting minutes, and she was very, very good at it. But she has since left that board, so we've had to hire help for that. And that's the cost. I mean, we're estimating the ZBA will have 6 meetings, BOS have 24 meetings, and the Budget Committee about 24 meetings.
Why is our Budget Committee double the price of the Board of Selectmen?
That Board of Selectmen actually probably should have been $150.
So without doing the math, that would mean that this line is incorrect, I'm assuming.
I don't know. Yeah, it didn't get changed, but I know that recently it did go up to 150.
It was 50 last year.
Any questions on the Board of Selectmen budget?
I did. Oh, go ahead.
David, go ahead.
Sure. So I did notice, I know we talked about this earlier, like with the mileage and the training. The mileage, for example, it looks like you looked at the 3-year average, but then realized that there was, an obvious potential for reduction due to travel. So I guess looking at this logic and applying it to some of the other places that we see mileage, if you've used that 3-year average, but maybe even in this instance, it looks like you're looking back at kind of the lowest 2017, look at the lowest number there. Is that a logic that we could apply across some of these other budgets?
I'm a little different. What happened with me, I think 2017 expense is more accurate of what my normal travel expense should be. But in 18 and 19, I was, two things was going on. I was attending a certification class. I was traveling up to Concord like twice a month. And at the same time, too, I was interim zoning enforcement officer, and I was doing a lot of traveling in town. So that certification class I completed that, and I most likely the certification class we haven't for level 2 is most likely going to be virtual for at least 6 months. Mm-hmm. So I don't see myself doing much more traveling than the 250.
And I agree. I think my point was applying that logic that you're talking about right there with that particular piece being virtual at some of the other budget items and using that as a lens to think about possible reductions.
Yeah. It's just that, I mean, it applies for me, but I can definitely have department heads take another look at it, but me directly, it was because of the class I was in twice a month going to Concord. And, there was a lot of traveling in town, going to look at this junk car and going to look at this and this shed and fence and
right.
And I'm not doing that now. I'm no longer the interim zoning enforcement officer. The building inspector has that job and he has a town car to do it.
Thank you.
I feel like this is one of the lines that was just updated over the past day.
I just did it. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Because I had it at 512. All right.
So I have more of a comment than a question, and I saved it till now just so that I could look you in the eye, Mr. Brown, and say, please, this is not personal whatsoever. Can't do anybody else that's on here. Just, I'm seeing a trend now 3 times of a salary increase that is greater than 5% and approaching 8%. And I heard what you said earlier in terms of comparing it to other similar jobs in different locations and things of that nature. But, when I take a look at from the private sector standpoint, you can work for a company that is a Fortune 500 company, and folks know that, a potential salary increase, if you get 3%, if you get anything at all, you should consider that to be like a pot of gold. So I guess just where we already were facing a situation of an additional $150,000 spend based on the communications refresh that we're looking to do was now really the best time. And then, I'm having a hard time stomaching that type of percentage increase. During these particular times, part of public service and public sector is the safety of, less likely to be laid off. I mean, the town did a fantastic job of making sure that people held on to their jobs. Certainly in the private sector, 20% of people lost their jobs. So it's just, again, I mentioned this during the very first meeting I joined. It's a give and take. You can have salary, you can have benefits, or you can have stuff, but you can't get all 3. And at some point, there needs to be a balancing act that, if you want to give higher salary, then maybe you have to kick in more for retirement or benefits and things of that nature. It would just make me feel more comfortable reviewing this budget if I saw something that was a little bit more towards the norm across.
I think it's a great point. I do. And it gets back to the same overtime discussion too, because you have increases in salary, but we're also seeing still 200,000 in the budget for overtime, right? I mean, something has to give here. I think with this, it's a little bit different than the sanitation administration conversation with the increase that we saw there. I believe this is contractual, right? I mean, I don't think it was just give it. I think it's part of the contract.
Right, and I get it, because I mean, Mr.
Yeah.
Hodgkins brought up in a prior meeting that, we can't go against this because it's a contract, it's a contract, it's a contract. Well, at that point, okay, if it's a contract and you're going to tie my hands on this, then you know what? I'm sorry, but I have to take away less toys, because you can't have a room full of toys and every Xbox game you ever wanted because you get this high salary. You have to give up something at some point.
When we negotiated his contract last year, we capped his increase at 2%. Okay, and we also, I believe, capped earn time.
So
he gave a lot in his last contract. We gave him a 5-year deal. He took a less of an increase from 3 to 2, and also some other areas he gave in on as well.
Okay, but I didn't want to get into the specifics of Mr. Brown.
It deserves an answer.
Just so that way you're here. It's just, if I take a look at, okay, so the 2020 amount, there was an extra pay period, so now you're taking a look at from 2019 to 2021, and it's a 8.8% increase. It's just, and this seems to be the number that keeps coming up in the calculator of 8 point something percent. At some point, it troubles me, and it makes me believe that that's part of the reason why we're in this constant tax increase year over year. That's all. So it's just
next year at this time, what you will see is a 2% increase, because I'm locked into a 2% for the duration of the contract.
But not 2%.
Prior to that, in that contract, my first 2 years was a level funded.
Right.
So I mean, it's
I don't want to make this about
I know.
a specific example.
So,
I'm just saying that as you're negotiating these types of contracts, people in the private sector can easily go 3 years and get level funded, no raise, regardless of how well they perform. And ultimately, when you take a look at, okay, well, we looked at similar jobs, and this brings it up to that particular standard. In the private sector, a company is not going to do that. It's up to you to then at that point go to that other job and go take that other job. So that's all. It's just from a negotiating standpoint, it's just very troubling to see that kind of increase.
We have, and just because it'll come up throughout the budget discussions, what the board has done for all the contracted employees, they've negotiated a 2% increase. So you're going to see this, this jump, because it is what it is. But after that, it's locked. It's consistent. So the department heads a 2%. Police chief, town administrator, the police captain, all locked into 2%.
Great. Okay. Anything else on Board of Selectmen? Hearing none. Let's get into legal expenses, 4153.
All right, so we're at right now recommending 38,116. I think this was, again, just taking a look at the 3-year average. That represents a $6,884 decrease over last year.
What happened to the PFOA line?
So they, at this point in time, that's been removed. I mean, whatever PFOA legal work we do will be absorbed into the total 38,116.
Is there an end in sight on this one? I ask this every year. I mean, I think I've asked every year, just like, or is this just like,
it's
until my grandkids die, I will see a PFOA number on this list?
Yeah, it's, with this level of funding is, you know, the board's hands are really tied of how active they can really be. So the funding is there for our general counsel, which provides assistance to a lot of our boards and committees as well. And really issues that continue to come up with the PFOA, St. Cobain.
We're part of
Issues more at the state level, permitting issues. and
we're
stuff.
part of a consortium, are we not? That is supposed to be dealing with these guys. Just are we still meeting with them through the consortium?
The consortium?
Wasn't there was a group of, as I recall, there were a group of several towns that were meeting together, splitting up legal fees, which is where some of this came from, with the expectation to meet with them. Are we are we done with that and we're relying on the state and laws?
Yeah, there was initially, when the onset of this, there was one or two meetings with some of the towns, but really there was never any formal agreement made that we would unite and fight a battle together. It's hard because, you know, the problem is for the town to determine what the damage is. You also have, you know, individual cases that are being filed on behalf of all impacted residents. So we can't represent those people.
I just remember there was an expectation that we would at some point settle. There would be some revenue to offset a lot of the expenses we've outlaid. I mean, is there, or at this time, do we just say it's sunk costs where there's not going to be anything recovered?
Those discussions right now are, that's the hope. I mean, it's again, it's tough.
So the way I personally look at this line is, you know, we're still tasked as a budget committee to come underneath the tax cap. We have to make reductions somewhere in order to present the budget to the town, right? This is one area that I'm looking at, and I'm looking at funding this at $30,000 based upon what I see. We've been very fortunate I mean, everyone knows legal costs can be very expensive, right? I don't think anyone's disputing that. You know, our current spend as of September 18th was just over 15,000. I don't know what it is as of today, but
It's almost 30.
as of today. So it's gone up double in 1 week. That doesn't make sense.
No, you're at current spend is 15.5.
Yeah. So it's at 15.5. You know, 2019 was 25,000, but 2018 was 43, almost 44,000. So this is a line that is really a best guess. But in a year that we need to find money, this is one of those lines that I'm going to be looking at personally.
No, and I agree. It's just, to me, the understanding had always been, well, we're negotiating, we're going to try to settle, but it doesn't look like that we've hit a brick wall at this point. So
I know Miss 40 is so.
well, and as we've said in the past, though, this is one of the situations where they can spend us under the table. Like, you know, we can keep
Yes.
fighting, but their pockets are deeper. So at some point, I guess, you know, I don't know. It's a lousy situation to be in as a town. I don't know what the right answer is, but I think if we're not spending the money and there's no ability to go that avenue, and we're looking for other sources of resolving the issue, then yes, I think that Mr. Cutter's suggestion is likely a very good one.
You know, now that the new MCLs were passed, the lower MCLs of what is the maximum contaminant allowed parts per trillion,
Thank you.
it is going to be, there will be a little more teeth at the state level to go after certain things. It gets insanely complicated. I've probably spent like 15 hours in meetings just this week. So it's a lot more than I can try to distill in it, but it seems like that is kind of where things are shifting, is more through state agencies and then trying to, I'm not holding my breath for any.
Right.
That's
So
a sad reality, right?
It's sad.
So, Mr. Brown, is there a tangible benefit that we can show to the taxpayers that over these legal fees that they paid over the last few years?
Well, a lot of the legal expense that was incurred was initially when when there was discussion with Saint Cobain and, through those discussions, we were able to get, for example, every road that they touched, they were required to grind that road down to gravel, reshape it, and build it just like a brand new road. Going into those discussions, they wanted to literally just cut a trench, 2 feet wide down the middle of every street in the north end of this town and patch it. So I think there's a huge benefit, the fact that we were able to get those roads all resurfaced and, they're not in our 6-year paving plan. It allowed us financially to really catch up on our paving. But that was, that's how that discussion started out.
We'll also get into this with the hydrants. Right, wrong, or indifferent, that the north side of town now is all hooked up to hydrants, which is a benefit that they didn't have before.
Yeah.
Right.
And
we pay for that.
Right, it's a benefit.
As you'll see.
As Mr. Lascelles had mentioned,
But we did,
Pay for that
on
too.
Monday, it's a.
in those discussions, you're right.
$500,000,
We
yes.
had them install the hydrants and they kind of resisted that because there was a cost in that, but
So I guess the follow-up question is there a point that, it is a diminishing return to continue
I think-
to spend the legal amount on this to get something as far as a tangible benefit?
I think with $38,000, you're, and how much of that, if 25,000 is your normal spend for just our general legal work, we don't have a lot of money here to accomplish a lot.
Talk
But
to
you
a lawyer
still
for a day
need,
and it's $2,500.
we're still going to need some funds because, there's going to be work that's going to be starting up again here soon.
Yes.
And, who knows as they continue to have the groundwater monitoring stuff, if it expands, the contaminated areas, it could expand.
There's actually been a couple other people in town that have said that they've tested and it's come up contaminated.
Yeah.
So, and they've run water lines to all the houses in the area, correct?
They have.
And I think Mr. Lascelles and Mr. Bohm filed legislation with the state to require them to pay not only for the installs, but for future water bills for the homeowners that are affected. So hopefully there's something small come out of this that's good, besides a large water bill.
Okay, let's, in the interest of time, let's move forward into planning board 4191, please.
Planning board now? Planning. Selectmen, bottom line, not a lot of change here. We have a bottom line recommendation of $41,616, represents a $443 increase. So pretty much the planning board is run by our volunteer board members. We have a part-time administrative staff, works about 16 hours a week here, handling the office, phone calls, correspondence, working with developers, and taking minutes for doing the administrative work for the board. We also, you see line number 392, the planning board NRPC planner. That's the National Regional Planning Commission. We contract out planning services, and there's a small reduction there this year, $500. But the budget is $18,000. This person is the one that will review all the plans that are submitted, make all those technical notes against our own zoning regulations, and work with the planning board on the presentation of the plans and recommendations of conditions and additional studies that should be looked at. So those are professional services we contract out. The public notices, that's an increase. We're seeing that in today's times, not just because of COVID, but just the fact that the newspapers are slowly disappearing, that our printing costs are increasing. So the planning board is required to give legal notices when they have a subdivision plan, a site plan, and those notices must go in the paper. However, we have an application fee. Every applicant pays $100, and that goes towards helping reduce that cost. So even though we budget, $1,500, you'll see on the revenue side, I don't know what we actually budgeted, but it's offset with some of the revenue fees that we charge. Some of the advertisement that we put in the paper is strictly driven by the planning board. If they're going to propose any zoning regulation changes, then they have to put a legal notice in the paper and give public hearing notices. So,
Mr. Brown, on NRPC, right, I know we've been fortunate over the last several years to have reduced costs over what this line once was. There was many years and years past that this was 20,000, 22,500, etc. Looking at actuals, currently we're at just over 5,000. Again, as of a week or two ago,
6,400.
6,400 now. Okay, thank you. In 2019 we were at 8,500. Right? How real is the $18,000 number?
It's really driven more by the development activity in the community, and if you get into development that's going to require 4 to 6 meetings, so it's hard to really predict. And then it's driven by the planning board's activity, their own administrative work, as they're trying to work on updating sections of the master plan, or trying to rewrite some sections in their subdivision regulations or site plan regulations. So, and that's why you kind of see the peaks and valleys of the actual spend versus the proposed budget.
So for our CIPC meetings that
I charged that time to this line.
This line.
Yeah.
Yep. So in addition to, I guess that's my point. So in addition to planning board meetings, the NRPC was also supporting us for 14, 15 meetings this year on the CIPC, and we're still at $6,500.
And then we'll have to reach out too, but they do lag a little bit in their billing. So sometimes you can get a bill and it's for the previous 3 months. So I will have to, this time of the year, actually, we do have to reach out to them and make sure they catch up on their invoicing.
Yeah, that would be really helpful
It
information.
has been,
if we want to take it.
I mean, you picked up on something, I've looked at it.
Yep.
And it has been historically lower in the last couple of years. But I'd like to see the planning board, utilize that funding and continue to keep working on their master plan, their regulations, and because that's important work, not just dealing with, site plan and subdivisions, but updating our own land use regulations and preparing for the future.
So in 2021, my question to you, in terms of, maybe coordinating with the planning board in the next step, is how would a $3,000 reduction in this line really impact what 2021 what you have planned for 2021? Right? If I set this at 15, or if the committee agrees to set this at 15,000, I'd like to know in advance what impact that potentially has.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, let's move into zoning, please. 4191.
So we have a $700 proposed increase. We have bottom line of $1,616. The $700 increase is directly related to the advertising. And again, this is actually driven by activity. And with the economy that we've had and the activity of homeowners putting in pools and sheds and additions, there's variances for this and variances for that. The zoning board has been extremely busy this year. I've never seen them so busy. So I anticipate that will continue through 2021.
So I have a question. If it costs $150 for a legal notice, why is our application fee not associated with the actual expense?
Well, their fee is, the planning board, I know, had an application fee of 100.
Mhm.
I don't know off the top of my head what the zoning, is it 100? Plus, they do have, they pay all the certified mailing costs. So they have their flat fee and then the mailing costs.
Right, but if it's associated with somebody's project and they're paying an application fee, should we not try to capture all the costs associated with that application in the fee?
Yeah, I think that's the intent with the fee structure that we have. But remember, right, we have to gross budget.
Because last year it was 100 and this year it's 1. So if our last year's, our application fee was commensurate with how much it would cost in our budget, but this year it's not. So I guess the question is,
Sometimes it comes down to the number of abutters. So you could come in and your certified mailing costs might only be 2 abutters. In other cases, it could be 6 or 8. I mean, I think the 150 is just kind of what we would expect, an average notification, printing, and the mailing costs.
thank you.
Any other questions on zoning? Okay, let's move into cemeteries, please. This is 4195.
All right, so our cemeteries, bottom line, $13,790. We have an increase here of $3,290. However, when I presented this to the Board of Selectmen, I informed them, even though this looks like it's an increase, really, when I went back and took a look at when this project was, when the service was bid out, it was kind of based on an estimated number of cuttings. And so it was bid out not as a flat fee for the year, it was bid per cutting. And at the time, it was estimated at 14 cuttings. And I don't know, through the last few years in budgeting, we never really captured the fact that, it's about 14 cuttings a year and the fee is the fee per cut. So I've made some adjustments there to reflect what the real cost is. Now, every season's different. So there are seasons where, you might do 16 cuttings and opposed to 14. So it's not a fixed cost, it's per cut. And, I think we've just been carrying a flat number and not really trying to calculate what the cost would be on a cutting basis. Now, another thing that happened was that we've had to take on the spring cleanup cost. And for many years, that cost was actually done by the county prison program, where they'd bring out prisoners and they would come out and do the whole spring cleanup of all of our cemeteries. That service is no longer available. And as you can see, that's costing us about $2,500 a year.
My personal view is your groundskeeping is way expensive. It's very expensive for what it is, I think.
Is that a bid? Is it something that's bid out?
This was bid, several years ago, but it was competitively bid.
When does the contract expire?
I think it was bid at that time. I don't believe it was a bid where it, for a 3-year period or anything like that. It just went out for bid and he's held that price ever since. I don't know if it's on that info.
Perhaps next year it might be worth considering reaching out, I guess. Just at least to check the price.
I mean, I remember conversations on this committee that this used to be volunteer driven, right? Where there used to be townspeople that went out, they did the spring cleanups, more of a community type of event, right? I'm sure Mr. Leary, you can speak to that, right? Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to see that program reinstated. I mean, it's a cemetery. I understand that, but it's a good way to bring community together to take care of our town property as well, right? a savings to the taxpayer.
The first couple of years when we did hire somebody out, it was somebody else other than Dalmatian, and there was numerous complaints about them cutting people's flowers that were on the graves. People had flags on the graves that got cut and destroyed, and so this is the company that we went with. They were competitively priced, and they've done just a spectacular job with it. It is expensive, but think of the intricate work that they have to do.
Is there any insurance that's required?
They
Right?
have to
What if
carry
there's
regular
damage to a
insurance, right?
stone
They-
or,
They're
regular
fully
insurance,
insured.
I guess that's part of it as well,
Right.
right?
It's cemetery maintenance is different than, just doing regular lawns or fields.
A lot more to cut around.
It's, I mean, you've got uneven surfaces. I mean, you've seen the old New England cemeteries. You're not moving very fast, and the trimming around the monuments, and then you've got flower pots and statues, and it's labor intensive. It's slow work.
Any questions on cemeteries? All right, let's move into advertising, please. 4197.
Let's see here, what do we got? Printing. Okay, so the first item here is the printing the school and town voter guide. As you saw last year, for the first time, we did a joint effort with the school, and that was directly related to the fact that we lost our local newspaper. So the fee that we were paying, contracting it out to the printer and then paying the newspaper to insert it, was right around $1,700 a year. Doing everything in-house with the school and using a mail service, this represents, I believe this is like half. And so $850 is what we would pay versus the $1,725. And then public notices. So this is the one area where the public notices and ads. This is really used by the Board of Selectmen. So whenever we have a hearing, like the rec committee just went out for an RFP to do their field mowing. I did an RFP for painting the old town hall. Any legal requirements for any ordinance. So that's what this line's for. And then dues and subscription, we have 2 membership dues. We have New Hampshire Municipal Association and the National Regional Planning Commission. And those we haven't actually received. NHMA doesn't set their dues membership until probably the end of October or November. NRPC has submitted theirs, and as you can see, it's $6,288. I don't suspect that NHMA will change that much. It doesn't usually.
So the dues just allows us to utilize their services because in addition to that, as we just saw on the planning board line, they charge per hour on top of that, correct?
Yeah, they do a lot. The Regional Planning Commission, it's not just the staff that they provide to us. It's the regional effort of putting together those the regional transportation plans, various grants. They highlight it in the letter here. Let's see. They do the household hazardous waste. They do our town tax maps. So we don't pay to have our tax maps updated. They handle all that. They have all of our GIS data, and they have any kind of mapping service that we want that they can do for us and print out for free. If we want to go out and gather additional information, you do have to pay to have them come out with their GIS team to collect the raw data.
Okay. Any questions on advertising? All right, moving into welfare vendor payments 4445.
So I think we just kind of left this on the agenda just for discussion.
How's it working out?
We haven't been able to really test it yet.
That's good, right?
So we,
Yeah, it means it's working
you know,
out right.
right now, to be honest with you, and I think this is the best way to proceed, that for people that don't know, last year, we established an expendable trust fund in the amount of $10,000 for this purpose. And the reason is that for the last, 5 years, we keep trying to budget what we think what the cost might be. And every year, is a different number. So it was at the budget committee's recommendation, why don't we establish a special fund for this, monitor it, and if we need to replenish the fund, we'll replenish it. So what we've decided to do is we'll charge any assistance that we grant, we'll charge to the operating budget and make a decision at the end of the year whether or not we need to tap into the expendable trust fund or not. So I'd like to try to preserve that $10,000 and not touch it. But if it ends up being that we have $8,000 worth of expenses and I can't cover that bottom line, then we would reach into the expendable trust fund. So try to preserve the 10 grand for as long as we can. My greatest concern right now is the fact that we haven't had a lot of activity and that we know that the impacts of COVID, what it's had on our families. And there's been some assistance out there for rentals and electric. There's been laws that says you can't evict people. And I just wonder as we get closer to November and December and into the first of the year that we're going to see a lot more need in this area.
Okay. Moving into patriotic purposes, 4583. And I just noticed on the Google Sheets, there's a lot of us in the Google Drive and the Sheets right now. There's a user called Anonymous Sheep. I don't know who that is. Hacked?
Well, we have a $50 increase. Why do we have a $50 increase? Oh, because I did a zero-based budgeting. So I just did a 3-year average, and that's what it came out at. This patriotic purposes really funds the Memorial Day service. So it includes for example, this year the service was canceled, but we still had to purchase the wreaths. We purchased flowers, but the big problem was down in front of the old town hall and in front of here, our American flag in front of this town hall. We had to change all the flags out and all the internal ropes. And so we spent a lot of money just updating that equipment and the flags. But every year it's things like that for the service.
Okay. Any questions on patriotic purposes? Let's hope for a parade next year. Okay. Conservation, 4611.
Selectmen, 1,000 bottom line, $1,495. It represents a $97 increase. One of the things that they are looking to do is purchase so they can utilize volunteers. They want to purchase a mower and a chainsaw.
Ooh.
And so this is,
We're gonna have volunteers use a chainsaw.
Well, obviously there's volunteers that can use chainsaws, but
Yeah, they usually have their own.
and I don't think there's.
I'm signing something.
Yeah, I would suggest we send that to legal
I don't think
first.
there's going to be a volunteer who's just going to grab a chainsaw for the first time. It would be someone.
I feel like we've talked about this last year too, right?
Yeah.
And the idea is that you can leverage the highway department and other equipment.
That's fine. I'm just worried about some person just picking up.
Look,
chainsaw.
if there's a need for a chainsaw within the town, fine. Is it right to fall within conservation? I'm not so sure. But
Right.
Anyway. Any questions on conservation? Okay. Last but not least for tonight is debt service, 4711. A lot to talk about here.
That
4711 or?
Yeah, I don't see it in the Google sheet.
4723.
Oh, 4723, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. It was on this sheet wrong. My apologies. 4723.
So our debt this year, $263,564. This represents the fire station bond payments. Just so you know, when I talked earlier about the lease purchase for the radio tower communication project, because it was a lease purchase, we ended up putting that in the general government buildings area. So that's where you'll see that show up, not as actual debt.
Any questions on debt service? Okay, that concludes our budget review for tonight. Thank you for those that presented again. Thank you to the town administrators as well for your support throughout this entire process. Next week, October 8th, next Thursday, we'll meet again to talk about Parks and Rec, library, information technology, mosquito, health agencies, insurance, and general government facilities. Moving into the next part of our agenda, which is member input, new business. I'll open the floor. Anyone have any comments? Ms. Harrison? Nope. Okay. Anybody in the room? Is it beneficial to walk through the file that I sent across this evening, or does everyone have a good understanding of kind of what it does, what it has? It's up to you. We're good?
I've seen them before, so I'm fine.
Yeah, it's
So
the same file that's been through
Yeah,
the
I'm comfortable with it.
past couple of years.
I appreciate the time and effort you put into it.
Yeah.
So I think
Sure.
that's
Well,
excellent.
if anyone finds it even a little bit helpful, then it was worth it. So,
Is that your analysis?
Yeah.
Yourself?
There's and Troy has a copy of that, right? So he.
I did circulate it to all.
Excellent.
Yep, absolutely. Okay. That being, yes.
Mr. Carter, I'm sorry. I do have a question. Or a comment. I do appreciate the Excel sheet being loaded up into Google Docs. That's kind of how we do things in the school district, so that's very helpful to me. Is that a good resource? Should that be updated when we make changes or when changes are made by the select board?
So, yeah, as I am made aware of those changes, I will update my files and then repost that file to the drive.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yep, absolutely.
The Google Doc itself, the link will always live, so every time we make a change.
For you, they're talking about the analysis file that I posted
The
today.
analysis, okay.
Oh, no. I meant the actual budget.
Oh,
Yeah, that's a live
That's a live
document
document.
and it will change.
Perfect. Yeah, I thought you made the changes tonight. Thank you.
Okay.
got it. Okay. All right, we'll move into public input. Mr. Brunella, I just don't.
Maybe that's where the sheep is.
Yep, thank you. Appreciate it. All right, with that, we'll conclude tonight's meeting and I'll entertain a motion.
So made.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Douglas, a second by Mr. Sun. We'll do a roll call vote. Ms. Harrison?
Aye.
Mr. Leary?
Hi.
Mr. Hodgkins? Ms. Douglas?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Aye.
Mr. Sun?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes.
Ms. 40?
Yes.
And myself are an aye. All right, we have now concluded tonight's evening. Tonight's session, we'll pick it up again next week, next Thursday at 6:30. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's too many.